Hey, what's up? Romeo 615 videos here. So, I wanted to give a little bit of an update on how to kind of use the physics and change the hairs around to kind of work with what you want. So, we got the strand size, right? By increasing the strand size, the hair begins to get a little more detail. You can come over here and select your groom, and we can look over in the debugger. So, I'll select the hair. And you can see if I scroll down to the simulation area, there is a debug simulation that allows me to see the changes that I'm making to the hair and how it's being affected. So I'm going to take this up to 4 strands. Now with the 4 strands, you can kind of get an idea of how the dreads are starting to interact and how the hair clumps seem to work. Now I'll go through some of my settings to show. I've changed the gravity down to give the dreads a more weighty kind of feel. I'll reset this back to 0, and you can kind of see how the dreads fluff up and kind of stay in the position. But if I really want the dreads to be heavy without changing the density, I can simply come down and change the gravity. So we'll turn this back to where we had it roughly. Now if I come down and I start to select different options, you can see here by my sub steps that I've changed this drastically. So we'll go down to 1 sub step and you can kind of see the difference. We've still got movement and we can see where the hair clumps are. So let's take this up to about 8. Now you can kind of see how the hair reacts. If I bring up the iteration count, you can see on the debuffer where the hair starts to spread out, and I have a little control over how I want this to go. So I usually like to keep this number low because I don't need a lot of iterations, and I like to keep this number somewhat low, but you can try it higher and see the results that you get. We'll bump this up to an 8. Now let's take it and bump it up to a 16. So here you can see where the hair starts to bunch up a little more. So we'll take this back down to around 8. And I can kind of see where the hair is not shifting as much. Now depending on your bend steps and your dampening, you can change how much the hair moves. So here we can see it doesn't really move anymore. The lower I go, the more the bend adjusts. So I'll take this back to a lower number, and I'll go a little lower than that. So we'll turn this 4 into a 0, and now you can see the bend goes a little wonky. So you gotta play around with it, and depending on the style that you want and how you want the hair to move, if you have a fast moving scene that's gonna cause you to go crazy, then you might want to lower some of the steps down. And you can see we have a little more control over how crazy the hair goes. Now, we come over here to the bend settings. You might not know what this is, but this kind of gives you a graph to pick where does the hair bend. So do I want it to not bend at the front and more bend at the bottom, or vice versa? You might want more bounce at the top, not so much bounce at the bottom. It's up to you guys how you want to do it. The same with the stretch stiffness. I can change the stiffness. You can see here by changing it just how much I can or can't bounce. Next, we want to come down to the collisions tab, and you might want to check out some of the static friction. So here we can kind of see what's going on with the different strands. So let's say I bump this up, and we can see the hair went insanely wild. But the lower I go, you can start to see in the debugger that we're getting a little more control, and we're starting to get rid of some of that flare up that you might see the dreads. And it all comes down to how you want to edit it. And so you'll have more control based off the style, tempo, speed, and movements of your animations. And like I say, I wanted to leave this open-ended so people are able to just kind of create what they want and see how it works out for them. Now we can check the collision radius, where we can see that the hair shows really well in the debugger just kind of how your hair is reacting. So we can say by turning up the radius, and I'll turn off the debugger just for a moment so we can see what's going on with the hair underneath. So by coming back down and just simply turning off the debugger, we can kind of see what's going on. If I turn the collision radius up, we can start to see that the more we move, the more it's telling us, hey, I don't want to come close to the face. So you can play around with your collision radius as well as determine which part of the collision radius. Do you want the bottom, the top, or the whole thing? And so let's do an example of just pulling this collision radius up. Now you can see it kind of starts from the top of my dreads. But if I bring it back down, I'm kind of only wanting the bottom of my dreads to be worried about how big the collision is between the two. And here you can see you can change where the collision happens on the Y, X, and Z axis. And let's try some of that. And so here you can see changing on the Y. Looks like the hair goes a little closer to the face. Now let's bump it up to something crazy. And so this might help with if you have some issues where you're clipping through the body. You know, this is just a rough draft idea to show you guys kind of what you can and can't do with the pack and how to overcome some of the issues that you might face without having the setting set up to the way you want. And so now you can clearly see my collision radius is much lower, and I can still come in here and determine where do I want the collision to happen. And so here you can see at the bottom, just right here, that's where we've allowed the collision to happen. If I bring it even lower, you can immediately see that the collision isn't really being affected in certain areas. So feel free to change and adjust based on your needs for what it is you're doing with the hair. Different hairs might have different problems. And so this gives you an idea of different ways. And let's say if you wanted something where it was a little more, as you can see with the 8 steps, we have a little more weight to it. We have a little more bounciness. So there's more information going on. We can come over here and we can still change around some of the density and other settings to kind of work within. And as you can see, we might need to change our collision radius so it would stop it from going in our face. The higher the strand density. Let's go back to the debugger so we can see what's going on. So the higher the strand density, you can kind of see what's going on here. By lowering it in real time, we can see what exactly is happening. And so we're going to keep that at a low number. And typically I wouldn't really run 8, but it's up to you guys. The strand thickness just kind of gives an idea of how the hair interacts and how much hair feels to be clumped up to represent each dread. So we'll turn off the debugger, and here you can kind of see that when we go up a little too high with our thickness, and maybe our smoothness is down a little too low, that you can see just by changing it, we start to get different results. And so this gives you a visual representation. And again, we can start at the top, or we can, well, if I can find it again, but we can determine, what part we want the thickness to be. Do we want it thin at the tip, thick at the top, or do we want it thin at the top, heavier at the bottom? So you have some control over your dreads, and it's kind of, like I say, up to you guys what it is you decide to do. Everybody's gonna have different ways that they want their dreads to act. I know some people want them bouncy, some people want them a little more stiff. So it's up to you what you decide to do and how you decide to make your dreads move. Now we'll come down here and we'll go back up to 4. And so as you can see with 4, I lost the bounce. If I were to jump up to 16, you can see we would really have to control how much of the hair is moving, how much is clumped up, because essentially we're just adding more information. So let's jump that back to 4. And because I had some settings that I liked before, I'll just go back and undo. And there we go. And so you can see, you can get a lot of different movement. You can get a lot of different styles. You can always come and, turn down the simulation. You can always turn down the simulation. And so here you can see, just by adding more, we can kind of see how the dreads start to react different. And as you can see, if I were to add more of these, I would definitely need to come and change the constraints, which I'm not going to do, but I'm just letting you see what would happen. And now you can kind of see the hair just going crazy based off the number of iterations. So let's pretend that we wanted to pull the bend stiffness up. As you can see, it's kind of locked down that hair from going crazy. And as you see, the lower we decrease it, we'll see that we get some of that movement back, but we still would have to adjust and fine tune so we could get that lumpy dreadlock feel. Also, sometimes a quick way, so I'll show you with the gravity, a quick way sometimes of kind of adjusting the dreads to fit more of a style that you might want, more stiff style or more fluffy style. It just depends on what you're trying to go for. We'll throw it back to 0, and here you can see the dreads kind of stick out a little, and I want them to feel just a little more heavy. So like I said, instead of going in there and changing the dread density, I'll just come in and change the gravity a little bit. Give it enough gravity that, it doesn't start swooping in my face. But again, if that was your desired effect, you could adjust the constraints on the collision area. And let's put this back to -15 so we don't have to worry about it flowing in our face. And let's go to the stretch settings really quick. So let's see what the stretch does in real time, right? So we'll turn the stretch down really low. And now you can see our dreads have a more bouncy, how far they can kind of go down. So let's undo that. We'll put it at something a little more so we don't have to worry about the dreads tugging. But again, if we wanted to take this up to a higher level, we can kind of start to see where we're getting a little bit of clipping going. And then I could come over here and say, hey, we don't want that at the top. We only want it at the bottom, or vice versa. And so you can get different effects, different results based off the way you choose to change your settings. Even to the point where you see sometimes if you move too much, you can get the dreads to kind of clump out. You can just basically clump the hair more, and you can use the debugger to do such. Well, you'll see the hairs will be spread out, and they'll go from spread out to kind of clump together. And so I hope this was pretty comprehensive. Is there some other stuff? So yeah, here with the debugger you can kind of see, and you saw when we changed the constraints before how the debugger handles those. And so you can kind of see here how it's clumping the hairs up. And let's turn the debugger off one more time with the settings all out of whack. And here you can see in real time what's going on. And so the clumpier they were, the more they moved. And so it's kind of up to you guys how you want to adjust and change things, and just really express yourself and express, your creations. Okay, let's go back because that's when I changed. But there you go. And is there anything else I should show you guys? So let's take this down to 1. Let's throw this up to 16 so we can see what's happening. And there you go. In real time, we'll bump it up some more. And we'll drop it back to 1. We'll take this up to 32. And we'll take them both up to 32. And you can kind of see what's going on, what the difference is, and how sometimes when you change something, you might need to go in and change something else. But you can get the desired look you want, the desired effect, even dampening the bend and stretch would allow you, if you really have like a fast motion scene and you want the hair to bounce, You'll just have to adjust the settings where you have enough steps to give you that extra springiness. Let's go up here. Let me change that back really quick. Alright, we'll leave the low iterations. And boom. You can see. I'll take that back up to 8. Let's go back up to 8. Maybe 5. And so, by changing the springs, if we go up to rods, you can see there's fine tuning that we need to do to the hair. So typically I use the springs, but you can use a custom solver. And since it is a particle system, you can use different pre-made. So this is a simple rod spring. And so there we go. It's going crazy. Let's keep going. Let's try spring. And spring works a little bit better, but you can kind of make your own little presets and save them. Let's see how crazy this goes. Yeah. And so I typically don't put any. I'll use, instead of using the custom solver, I'll use the groom springs. And that's where I kind of build from around. So I'm not really sure if there's any other, stuff we should talk about. I guess that kind of answers everything. And as always, you can cut off the simulation. If you have a fast moving scene and you necessarily don't need a lot of hair movement, or you might have to, adjust it where you get the shot with the hair that you want, and then come back in and just turn the settings really, really, really low, and it moves just the amount that you need for like fast motion stuff. But be wary of that. There's a lot of hair stuff I've seen out there that you kind of gotta make sure you know where you want your animations to be and how fast you want it to move, things like that. There might be some other times you might need to fake an effect. Let's say if the hair needs to stand up, maybe you would just change the gravity so the hair floats up, and change the position of your character in the scene. Say if you was doing a flip scene and you wanted the hair to seem like it was falling down like it was supposed to. So there's different options. I wanted to leave it open-ended for everybody. And there y'all go. Like, you can see what adding more steps did to it. And you can see it's a little more. It's actually letting me swing the hair a little more without going too crazy. Just trying to attempt to keep it in lumps. Let's throw this up to 32 and see just how wild does the hair grow. And so a little more control over where those dreads are clumped up a little more. And again, you can go in there and change the settings so it tightens it up. You can change the thickness and the density of the hair to kind of compensate for what you might be needing. You might be able to change the smoothness so that it doesn't move a certain way. So let's kick these up really high. Let's see what happens. So yeah, we start to get a little bit of jank the higher we went up. So let's bring that back down. There we go. I like to keep it low. And so you can see we took a little bit more of the movement out just by changing the density. And just by coming in and changing the strand thickness, we can adjust how much the hair just goes crazy or how tight does the hair stay. So I hope this was a good example. I tried to give y'all some good visual examples to help for the people who might not really be into hair grooms and they just need it to work a certain way for them. You know, this will get you in the right area to, you know, kind of tinker with and mess with until you figure out your settings and, you know, save it as a preset. All right, so I think that should conclude this video. It's your boy Romeo615 videos. Okay, so let me address this real quick because I can kind of see this collision happening through the face. And when that happens, you want to come and change this collision a little bit. Like I said, you can pick here which, you know, front, back, side to side, up, down. You can pick that through here. Let me see about turning up the collision radius. Okay, we still got some in his eye, so that's something, you know, we can be careful about. When changing the settings. So as we can see, turning the collision radius up a little bit and seeing as how I got it down a little bit. Maybe I can bring it up where it starts up a little more on the head and just come in there and fine tune it. Just come in and fine tune until the collision is acting the way I need it to. And make sure that it is where I need it to be. So as you can see, taking that down and bringing that up is what fixed that from going in his eye. And then like I said, I can come in and tweak the collision until where I get it just where I need it to. Come back in, change the settings a little bit. In this circumstance, I might even change the gravity. You know, I might bring the gravity down a little bit. And so I'll do another detailed tutorial about actually using the MetaHuman itself as a physics bubble kind of here. I don't remember exactly where to do it right offhand, so I don't want to lie to y'all. But there is a collision thing right here. Let's see. Nope, that says metal. So I don't remember what my MetaHuman one was, but there is a thing that you could use with just basically using the MetaHuman face. It already has the physical materials. I mean, it already has the collision stuff there. So, you know. But I'll be sure to definitely do a little detailed video on that and just show step by step when I'm actually looking at it and it's fresh to me. But for now, this should get y'all where y'all need to be, get you going, get you, you know, to help through some of the glitches you might come across, or, you know, scenarios that you might want to use the hair a certain way. And I would like to bring that gravity back down a little bit, just like I told you. Now you can see dropping that gravity too much made it drop in his head, so I might be a little leery of that. I might come up and I might fine tune and get an idea where my gravity might be to keep. And you can see that's the collision radius. So if you ever run across that problem where you feel like you move and it's popping up a little too high, you can always just come down and turn the collision radius down. And like I said, by turning it down, we can see that having the gravity so low that it's causing, and it could be the strand thickness, it could be, you know, some of this stuff as well. Like, so you got to be aware that when you change one thing, you might actually affect something else. So you can see how that just totally, whoa, that probably crashed me. So I guess that is the end of the video. Peace out. But you see with the example, like having it too dense, having the density too much will cause the dreads to feel heavier and kind of sink more in. So that is where you can kind of change it and use the gravity to offset it. It's your boy Romeo 615 Videos. We just crashed on the video. All right, peace, y'all.